lovely to have lovely Peter Anderson to sort of host this really webinar this evening. And I love your topic, Peter, and I had a real little giggle with you when you when you sort of talked a little bit about you know the way you like to share about the principles with children, and I love the way you call it. It's uncovering the best kept secret in the universe. Yeah, so I'm going to let you introduce yourself, because probably the most qualified person to do that.
Okay.
And yeah, let's start.
So I think the plan is that there's about 15-20 minutes of some talk from me, but then we can open it up for a sort of general discussion and sharing, because I'm sure there's stuff that you're doing too that you can share with people. And the whole concept behind these webinars really was one of sharing. It's not about somebody being an expert and coming and telling everybody, but it's just about sharing stuff that we've come across. So I'm Peter Anderson. I have spent my lifetime in education, really. I started school at 5 and I left at 59, so I've got to be a very slow learner. I was head of 2 schools for a long time, and then I've been head of 3 schools that were either in trouble or they just hadn't got ahead. And then I've worked for a school improvement private company that's there to sort of support schools. So that's sort of the working base. And through all that time, I've been fascinated on how it is we work really as human beings, and how children work and how adults work. And so I trained in NLP, I trained as a counsellor, but it was really my daughter Jenny who introduced me to these principles 12-13 years ago. And Jenny transformed. Jenny, you've probably heard Jenny's story, so I won't go into it a lot, but she transformed from being an ultra shy 22-year-old into a young woman with a voice, who is now jetting off to South Africa, to African Tekan, to work in townships today as we speak. Tonight she's off. She spoke at the Innate Health Conference last year, and where there's 1,000 people. So she transformed after a weekend's course, and I thought, this is drugs, or this is a cult, or both really. I didn't know if they had a funny handshake or what they had, but it seemed to be there had to be something behind it. And she chipped and chipped and chipped away at me. And finally, I went to see Jack Pransky do a talk in Colchester, and I was really lifted up by it, and it felt like coming home. And now I would describe it, it was reminding me that I was home, actually, and I've never left. So it was transformational for me too, not in such a dramatic way as Jenny, but I'd always been a worrier. I'd worried about things a lot, and on the surface seemed very calm and together and everything, but worried a great deal about all sorts of stuff. And it would go round and round and round and round in my head. And yet people would say to me, "You're so calm, Peter." And I'd be thinking, "Yeah, but you don't know." And so it changed that for me hugely. So on the surface, it might not seem to people that I changed much, but actually it was huge. It was huge. It was as much as Jenny's. It's just that mine didn't show as much. So tonight, what I wanted to share with you was a bit of how I see some of this and how I share this with children. And I've limited it because I wanted it to then be a sharing for us all together. And if there's bits that you're curious in and want to know more about. So the title of my talk is Uncovering the Best Kept Secret in the Universe. And I've written it down so I don't forget. And discovering our birthright. So when I go into schools and working, say, with a class of children, I'll go in, and so they're thinking, you know, who's this guy that's just rocked up in our classroom? So we'll have a little bit of banter, and then I'll say to them, now this afternoon, you're going to have to listen really carefully, because what I'm going to share with you, this is not just the best kept secret in the world. This is the best kept secret in the universe, the whole universe. And so there's like this shock, horror, and look on their faces. So, and then I say to them, so you're going to have to listen really carefully, because there's a real risk that you could go home this afternoon and your mum and dad would say to you, oh, what have you done today? And you say, well, I had this man come in and he said, I'm going to tell you the best kept secret in the universe. And so they go, yeah, well, what is it? And they say, well, I don't know, I missed it because I was talking to my friend. So that helps to get their attention a bit, really. And it starts off on a bit of a laugh and light-hearted, in a light-hearted way. So I don't want them to go home not knowing it. So imagine what that would be like, you know, so that you've got them all listening, really. So that, what is that best kept secret in the universe? Well, first of all, it's, you know, that we live in a big misunderstanding. We think that well-being comes from stuff outside ourselves. We think it as adults. We get drawn into that. Children certainly do. You know, if it's the adult, it's needing the latest car, live in the big house, have the perfect partner, then you'll feel happy, then you'll have peace of mind. Or, you know, if you're the child, it's having the latest trainers or the latest phone, or being with the cool group at school. And there's, you know, you're wanting to be in, everybody knows what the cool group is, the group to be with. And if you can do all that, then you're going to be happy. Then you're going to have some sort of peace of mind. And at one level, you know, in the world that we live in, where we're bombarded with adverts and we're told that if we have this stuff, it will make us feel okay. And if we have these relationships, then we'll feel okay. And it's so funny, really, that it's all of those things lead us into a search. And we're searching for stuff, and we're searching for things or for people, because really we just want that sense of well-being, for which, you know, that search just continually seems to evade us. So then the search goes on and on and on. So now you've got to listen to this bit really carefully, because this is the best kept secret in the universe. That our happiness and our sense of well-being are not conditional, and they're not outside ourselves. That's not where we're going to find them. So, you know, what we know, and people that have been studying a bit about Sid Banks and everything will know that Sid talks about that we feel what we think. So, you know, it's quite simple at one level. If we think happy, we'll feel happy. If we think angry, we'll feel angry. If we feel anxious, and I've got an honours degree in that, we'll feel anxious. You know, so if we think it, we feel it. We think it, we feel it. So that's sort of simple in a way. And I mean, to adults, sometimes too simple. And yet it's so huge, isn't it? And for people that have been around it for a while, you know, because you know what that does to you in your heart and in your soul, because it changes things. It changes how you see things. But we all get caught in that misunderstanding, and we get caught in it even when we know about it. And people, teachers that have been in it for sort of 30, 40 years still laugh because they get caught in it. They might not get caught for so long. I talked to Dickon recently, you know, and he's saying, oh God, yeah, I still get caught. I still forget. And I'm in my head and it seems real and I've made it so. Or it's a rule that we've made up in our head, and then we're not sticking to it, and then we're beating ourselves up about it, forgetting that we've made that up in our heads in the first place. How funny is that? We are funny as human species. And if there is a God as separate from us, and I don't think there is really, I think because God is part of all of us, but if there is a God, he must be having, or she must be having a real laugh to hide it within us, the very thing that we search for, and to make it so seductive, so that consciousness makes it so seductive that we think it's real, that we're sitting in a movie and we forget it's a movie, and we're being moved by it in all sorts of ways. So it's not the stuff in the world that's going to make us feel anything, is it? We know that. That's an innocent misunderstanding, just a misunderstanding. My computer's doing something. Wait a minute. Sorry. Blotting people out. Right, it's gone. Okay, what's that? Christine. All right, her connection's gone. So maybe she can have the recording or something. Yeah. So we feel what we think. We don't feel what's happening outside ourselves. So putting it another way, we live in the feeling of our thinking. And that's the second part to the title in a way, really, discovering our birthright. Because what is our birthright? What are we born with? What is it that's so special, really, that we've been given? Well, when we begin to fully grasp the implications of that we are feeling our thinking, then we can begin to trust that intelligent energy behind everything, what we will call mind, that brings us our experience, that we'll begin to trust that. We'll trust the system and not think that we know better. And the problems come when we think we know better and we think we're going to sort stuff out and we're going to machinate it in our little brains. And actually, when that settles down, everything's possible, everything's out on the table. So I guess, one way of describing our birthright would be to say, being in the flow of life. And in the flow of life, I look to my best teachers. My best teachers are young toddlers, really. So they move from extreme. They'll have an extreme exuberance to extreme despair in moments. He's now 6, actually, Archie, my youngest grandson. When he was 4, he and I had a boys' day out together. And I bought him a car, not, a little car. Grandparents do spoil their grandchildren, but, not to that extent. No, I bought him a small car that he wanted. And later in the afternoon, Catherine, my older daughter, phoned me and said, "Oh, can you get some milk from the supermarket, Dad?" So we go into this big supermarket, and Archie, who's fine, he's going along happy as anything. He sees this Superman outfit and he wants it. So I said to him, well, because as a good teacher, you don't do straight no's, you do partial agreements, we call it, in the trade. So he says, I really want that, Grandad. And I go, well, you can have it, but not today, because I've already bought you a little car. And, So then he went from being perfectly happy to having an absolute screaming fit. And he's screaming and he's shouting and he's beating his feet up and down and he's going all red and people are looking. And there's a single man on his own with a child who's screaming. And I'm getting in my head about this and I'm thinking, this isn't good. This doesn't look good. And was he going to stop? No, he wasn't going to stop. So I did what you can do when they're 4, and I picked him up under my arm and sort of hugged him and then lifted him up. And he's still screaming and he's all hot and he's all sweaty and he's horrid. And then I don't know how long, it seemed like 100 hours, but it was probably about a minute. He saw something else and he stopped and he just started talking to me again. Now, there was no analysis. He didn't start saying, now, I think I lost the plot at the point that you said I couldn't do, and actually, if I'd reframed it in this way, I could have he didn't have that. He had an experience. He had the experience and he then moved into the next experience. And life as little children is one experience after another, after another. It is for us too, but for the fact that we like to overthink stuff, and we like to analyze it, and we like to pick it apart, and we like to just get the meat out of it really, and see, so what is it, what does it really mean? So there was no sense that he wanted to sort of analyze any of it, and he just went on, and I got on. Nobody arrested me for, taking this little boy off, and it was all right. So when we can just accept that however we are, everything is okay, nothing's wrong, nothing's broken, everything's working just fine. There's an adult I was working with on Monday this week. That was only yesterday, wasn't it? Yeah. And he was saying to me, of course, I know when I feel that it's broken, and the system's not working, because I get very anxious. So that was great in a way, because it opened up the much broader discussion, because, we end up with preferences, don't we? We end up both as adults and as children. We like it when we feel happy and we feel light-hearted, and we don't like it so much when we feel anxious. But I heard Dickon do a lovely talk and a lovely sort of metaphor for that one time. And he said, it's a bit like saying, well, we inhale and we exhale, and we inhale and we exhale. Now, actually, I prefer the inhale. In fact, I just want more of the inhale. Now, we wouldn't last very long. And I like that, because there's a sense of the rhythm of life, of inhaling and exhaling, and that we have both. Both are there for us. And we've been given our feelings, we've been given emotions, and the full range. We haven't just been given just the happy ones. We've been given the full range, because we can then get that constant feedback to what our thinking's doing. Not that we're in that business of analysing that all the time. The children that I work with are not stopping to think, now, how am I feeling at this moment? But there is something about that when you understand how your system works, that's very freeing, and that some of the things that grip us, and grip me still at times, grip me less. And give children the time and space to let them sort of, it's just loving them really in the broadest sense of allowing stuff to calm down for them and to quieten down. And as things quieten down, things occur to them. So an 11-year-old I was working with, and I'd been asked to go into this school. There's a friend of mine that was the head, and she said, look, I've got this, it's a 5-class school. I've got this year 6 boy, and he's causing havoc. He hits people, he uses the worst swear words you can think of, and he's always falling out with people at lunchtime. So I meet him. I won't say his name, because I haven't, he's not somebody we filmed. So I haven't got permissions or anything. But anyway, call him John for a minute. So I said to him, oh, hello, John. So he says, oh, hello. I said, you can call me Peter. So he goes, oh, hello, Peter. So he says, I've got anger issues. So I go, all right. Yeah, he said, I've got anger issues. I said, well, no, you haven't really. He said, yes, I have. I've got anger issues. So we did the, no, you haven't. Yes, you have. Yes, I have. And batted that backwards and forwards a few times, to the point it made him laugh, because he was quite tense, but this sort of relaxed him a little bit. And I said to him, well, actually, what we'll begin to explore, and what we'll begin to find from this special secret that I can share with you, because it's a good secret, but it's the best kept secret in the universe, is that actually when you think angry, you'll feel angry. When you think happy, you'll feel happy. And when I got talking to him, one of the things that really, really made things worse for him was a lot of staff would all suddenly come round him at lunchtime. There'd be an explosion. He'd have hit somebody, he'd be swearing at the dinner ladies. So senior staff would come out, and then they'd all be at him. And he said, it makes me so cross. They just keep talking at me. Why can't they just be quiet? And he's getting really into it. Enough to make me cough, actually. Huh? Can't do these improvisations. So I said to him, look, this was when he was calm and we're chatting about it. So I said to him, what do you think would help you? What would help you? And he said, well, if people could just leave me alone. So I said, so you've done something, you know, you've hit somebody, you shouted at somebody. What do you want people to do then? He said, well, they want me to leave me alone. So there was a place he wanted to go on the field, on the bottom of the field, where they were not allowed to go. And it was near the fence, the perimeter fence. So I said to him, well, you have to come and talk to the head teacher. You put your case to the head teacher. So he did. And she listened carefully. She said, well, you've got to promise me you're not going to jump over the fence, because then you wouldn't be safe. So he goes, no, I won't do that. So anyway, he still had some blow-ups, but he took himself off. And actually, what was happening is that he took himself off before he got into the swearing and before he was thumping people. And so his class teacher just couldn't get over it, because the afternoons were just so much calmer, because the old boy was in a much better frame of mind. And there's loads of examples like that, where give children the permission and the space and the time and hold a loving space for them, and their own wisdom will bubble up and they will come to their own solutions. There's a school we've been working with, quite a big primary school, 480 pupil primary school in Suffolk. And we've been working with them for over a year and a half, and we work with just their staff. We're not working with the children. The model that we're doing there is that we work with the staff, and then the staff decide how they're going to translate that into being for their pupils. And there was a young teacher. We did our first day training, and then we went back a week later for an after school twilight training. And we said, you know, anybody notice anything? So this young teacher's hand went up straight away. She said, I just want to say thank you. So I said, oh, what were you saying thank you for? So she said, well, I have had this really difficult set of year 4 girls that keep falling out with one another. And they just keep on falling out with one another. And I spend all my breaks and all my lunch times sorting out their problems. And after that first day's training, I'm realizing they've got the same wisdom and access to wisdom and new thought that I have. So what I say to them now is, right, you can go in that side room for 5 minutes and sort it out. And she said, and they have. And it was like a miracle to her. And then when we came back at the start of this academic year, back in September, we said, right, how's things going? You've just had your nice summer holiday and everything, She said, can I just say something? So I said, yeah, of course you can. So she said, I just want to tell you that it worked 100% of the time. I didn't have a time when I needed to come up with solutions for them. They came up with their own solutions. Very powerful, very powerful. I think too that if we can help children as we would want to help adults too, what Sid Banks said is about, imagine what a world would be like if people were not afraid of their own experience. Because we get frightened by it. You know, when you're little, you know, you get frightened because you think the boogeyman's going to jump out from under the bed. Or when you're bigger, the boogeyman might look different. It might be your boss. You know, for a lot of teachers in schools in the UK, it's the Ofsted inspectors coming in, is the boogeyman. Definitely. So helping children awaken and begin to see where their experience comes from helps them navigate life as it's intended, really. So we're just pointing them back. It's just a question of just re-navigating slightly, so that as they can move from thought to thought, and therefore from feeling to feeling, that they can just feel that that's okay, and not getting caught up in the stuff that we do as adults, where we will want to pick it to pieces. Are you still there, Ivana? I've got a green sign come up.
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, that's fine. Still holding my hand. That's good. Have I got time for a short story or not?
Yeah, go for a short story, and then it'd be lovely
Yes.
maybe to open up.
Okay. Okay.
Thank
So one of the children that we filmed, Kyra, and have a look at that film. But I just wanted to say a little bit more about it, because if you haven't seen it, it's worth watching. But there was a little girl who looks an absolute delight and is, but she was an absolute minx. She was using the worst language, you know, you effing see, she's saying to children. She was thumping children. She couldn't be with them unsupervised because she would explode. Her mum said to me, can I get child and adult mental health involved? It's one of the schools I'd gone in to look after because they hadn't got a head teacher at the time. And so I said to the mum, well, look, I could talk to her about this understanding. I told the mum a bit about it. And the mum said, well, look, I'm desperate. I'll try anything. And within the space of an hour, this child woke up. You could see her waking up to it. And then she's saying to me, you know I'm being horrible to other children. But I go home at night and I think I'm going to be different tomorrow. And I come in the next day and they all treat me the same. And it makes me so angry. Only she didn't say it like that. She said it with a grimace. And so we trained a group of other young people that she nominated as people that she wanted to be there as a circle of friends. And she just transformed and picked it up really quickly. And, you know, I don't know about you, but certainly I found that children don't turn around and say, oh, this is a bit like CBT or NLP or mindfulness. They don't. They just say, oh, that's how it works. Oh, I see that. Oh, yeah. And then they move on and they skip off into life and just live life, really. And there's a mother I met recently whose child is now 17, and she's one of the ones we filmed. Her name is Charlotte. And Charlotte transformed really quickly. And so I said to her mum, how's Charlotte doing? So bear in mind, really, I last finished with her when she was 11. So she's now gone through to 17 through some, you know, potentially turbulent times. And her mum's just said, oh, she's just sailed through it. And she helps her friends and she shares the understanding with her friends. And you think, wow, that's a gift, isn't it? To know something about it, however much it is. At times I think it's the tiniest slither, and at other times I think, yeah, I've been blessed, I know a little bit more, and then I think I know nothing. and it keeps varying. Tonight I thought I knew a little bit that I could share anyway with some of the stories. I've got hundreds of stories, but I'll stop at that point really, because I'm really keen that there's the opportunity to share and to respond to any of the things or question any of the things.
It's wonderful. Thank you so much. So let's open up. Anybody got any comments, questions, or stories that they want to share that kind of resonate with what Peter spoke of? If you kind of wave, unmute yourself. There's not so many of us, so we can do that. Natalie? Yeah, go for that.
Hi, thank you for that, Peter. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Really, really helpful. I guess mine's a question. I've been interested in sharing this understanding with children for a while now, kind of bubbling up. And anyway, last week I had the opportunity in my daughter's primary school to train the staff on a teacher training day in the 3 principles. Brilliant. And it feels like a kind of real milestone for me. So so thoroughly enjoyed it. I basically took them through the Spark curriculum, which is the one from the Cyprus Initiative in Florida. Yeah. And whilst I couldn't go through the entire curriculum, which is kind of 12 modules, I took some of the best bits and created a day for them, which highlighted like the key points of the principles using some activities. Interestingly, when we got to the piece around when children do get caught up in their thinking, how to help them settle down, And I use the analogy of a snow globe,
Yeah.
and you know, allowing their thinking to settle, just as we know, those that have been experienced to the principles, you know, how we, you know, how that helps for then fresh thought and clarity to emerge. And equally impressing on them that when we understand how the system works, when we get it, our bounce back ability just increases. We catch ourselves in it and navigate back to clarity quicker. But still, but how can we help? You know, the how to, and I guess this resonates with me, because equally, as I entered into the principles, seeing it a couple of years ago, I wanted my how-to guide, and I worked with a small group of people in corporate yesterday, and they wanted the how-to. So anyway, I know there isn't really a how-to, but I wondered if you could maybe speak to that and see if there's anything you could add from your experience.
Okay, that's a great question, and you absolutely for certain that comes up over and over. You know, I've had there's a group of head teachers Rudy and I work with, and they're going, yeah, we get all that, but how do we get this little Johnny to calm down? You know, calm down.
Yeah.
Now, you know, in terms of like technique or anything, it sounds weak, but you know, if you understand, if you have some grounding yourself, so as class teachers say, or the teaching assistant, if they've been included, and so that they're beginning to get some sense of where our feeling state actually comes from. If it's possible, and it's not always possible in a busy classroom, but if it's possible to be able to give that child some time to calm down. So, I mean, often the things that are troublesome are, they happen outside and then they're brought back into the classroom, and then it festers, and then the teacher's under pressure because the teacher needs to deliver the lessons that they've got, and they haven't got spare time to make up for, you know, 20 minutes of trying to settle down the class and all that. So I could, you know, that's the context in which people are working. If it's at all possible for that child, you know, if they're a bit older, to have a bit of time to sit in a safe place, maybe it's a book corner or something in the classroom, to calm down. If it's a known, you know, if this is a serial offender, and often they can be, then people will often get drawn into using the same stuff over and over, and then be surprised that it's not working and it's not effective. So one of the things that I'll do is that when children, when they're in the flow of life, when things are okay, when their snow globe is quite settled, or, you know, another metaphor I like using with children is a merry-go-round. You know, you get on the merry-go-round, and to start with, what happens? Well, you can see everything clearly. You can see your mum waving at you, and, you know, you can even see her earrings as you're going round. But then when it gets faster and faster and faster, what do you see? Well, they all say, oh, it's a blur. And that's what life is like. So when children, or adults for that matter, when it's a human being, when our mind is going super fast, everything becomes a blur. We lose that rational state. You know, we know that our body system physiologically gets pumped full of adrenaline and cortisol and so on. So asking children, you know, what would help you? You know, some of the times when you get really upset and, you know, maybe you're shouting or throwing things and things, what would help? And I've never ceased to be surprised at how often children will have some quite clear things that will help and won't help. You know, often adults swarming in on them and zooming in and all talking at them is not a good thing. To actually just have a signal that says, come on. With one 7-year-old boy, he came to our school, he'd been excluded from elsewhere, and he came in, and he'd be, somebody would come and get me as the head in the school, And he's shouting, he's going, I hate this school, I hate you, I'm going to go to the shops and I'm going to get a gun and I'm going to shoot you all, I hate you, I want you dead. And so, not in that moment, but in a moment, once I'd had a conversation with him when he was calm, I said to him, you know, what would help you when to calm down? So he said, because I said to him, you know, sometimes I have a cup of tea and I find that's really helpful. And he said, oh, having cold water, really cold water. So I said to him, oh, well, there's a chiller in the staff room. So that's where we could go. So the next time he's caught in his thought storm and he's shouting and he's screaming, I just go to the class and I just go, so he just comes with me. I don't speak to him. I hand him a glass. He goes to the water chiller, helps himself, drinks the water chiller. I pick up some papers and pretend to be reading them. And then sometimes 10 minutes, sometimes longer, he'd say, what's that over there? And he starts having a conversation. And then he sort of come back. So, you know, there's not a straight how to. I think for certain, crowding children in is not good, because we wouldn't like that as an adult. So giving them some time and space where adults can come, if it's at all possible, from a loving space, because you can say all sorts of things that to children, or to adults for that matter, because I've said some, had to say some difficult things to staff at times, but I've come from a good place. And if you come from a good place, then often you get really quite good outcomes. So children that, are refusing, that there's something's gone wrong outside, I've been sent out, can I go and get them? Because they won't come in and they've done whatever they've done. And so, I don't know ever what I'm going to say until I'm in the moment. And I think it's Keith Blevins talks about, the future is an incomplete equation. And so, when we try and think, as you would understand a group of people trying to get strategies to help them in the really difficult things that do crop up in school. But Keith says, that actually that incomplete equation, what it's missing is thought in the moment. And if we can if there's a sense of knowing that, I'm all right, the child's all right, the child's okay, they're having a thought storm for some reason or another, and it will go, and it won't stay like that forever. There is something that's calming about that, I think, and and I found that often, I've never had a situation where a child doesn't come round in the end. Sometimes it's gone on a long while. Sometimes it's a really long while. And that's where, as head, I didn't have the class responsibility. Saying that to a class teacher is much more tough. Because, if a child is acting out in the moment in the class, can you organise it that the teaching assistant or the learning support assistant takes control of the class, and then you go somewhere, say, come on, let's go somewhere quiet. And then you do that. That might, that's one way of doing it. If you've got a really good LSA who's going to come from a good space and is not going to be wagging a finger at the child, again, give the child a bit of time and space to let all of it settle down before you even begin to have any conversation about what's gone wrong. Because often people, because they're under pressure and hurrying to get stuff done, the child will still be in a heightened state. And then you're trying to talk to them about what it is they've done wrong and the consequence to it. And, it's meaningless really in that stage. Yeah. Does that answer it at all?
Yeah, no, it's wonderful. Really, really helpful. And in particular, I like the merry-go-round stands out. I think I can see that's helpful. And also, not forgetting the wisdom of the child.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That it doesn't have to be that the teacher knows exactly what to do, that, they find some space when it's appropriate, when there's when there's some clarity, to invite the child to make some decisions on that.
I used to bang on as to our staff that if you've got 30 children in the class and you've got yourself, you've got 31 teachers there. And that as the sort of culture and ethos of the place is really important, because then you see that the contributions that children can make can be equally as valid as any of the adults. And certainly in terms of knowing about how best to regulate themselves, they will have ideas about that. Sometimes they'll be off the wall, you know, if they've got to say, I've got to go and sit on the shed outside, well, you can say, yeah, but we can't do that one. You know, let's think of something that you can do. If that boy had said to me, I need to run down to the bottom of the field and jump over the fence and sit on the other side of the fence, we'd have had to say no to that. But no, because, and then we could give the perfectly good, you know, because it wouldn't be safe for him, because he'd know he wouldn't be safe. But yeah, there's something else I was going to say then, but I've forgotten it. But
thank you, really helpful.
It was lovely. Fantastic question, and explore. Has anybody else got anything they want to ask or comment?
Yeah, Peter, thanks for tonight. It's fabulous. What are your thoughts on consequences? I mean, I'm working in a secondary school at the moment, and it's like a pupil referral unit for 600 kids. It's a really, really interesting place to work, shall we say. So a lot of kids are
right.
Attention. I mean, it's a very outside-in approach. But apart from that, you know, and the idea of punishing a kid is obviously, to me, is just not on. But, you know, in your mind, is there a place for consequences in certain places? I don't mean punishment, but, you know, like, obviously, if you throw something on the floor, then, yeah, the consequences, we'd like to pick it up, please. And ideally, I see it like you, that wherever there's an opportunity, and often it's very difficult, you see the kid afterwards, and you know, a restorative chat, and maybe a chance for a little bit of sharing with them. But we can't always do that. Yeah, so have you got thoughts on any sort of consequential stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I'm okay with that, really. I think that, you see, I mean, the principles themselves are not telling us how to live, are they? We know that. It's not about applications, it's about implications. It's about, we learn about the system behind life. And when we learn about that, from that naturally flows some implications.
Yeah.
Now, you know, where a child has crossed whatever boundary that boundary happens to be, I think consequences have a place where there can be potential learning in it. I think you know, and I mean, there can be learning of all sorts. There can be really bad learning, i.e., you know, you hate the system, the child just gets to hate the system even more, or that you can bring to life, you know, trying to put yourself in somebody else's shoes, so that you begin to sort of draw out some empathy. So that, you know, calling them that name, doing that thing to them, hiding their stuff so that they haven't got their work at the right time, you know, all the myriad of sort of lower level stuff that we would recognise. You know, I think there's definitely a place. It takes time. That's the trouble. You know, but you know, when staff come back to me and have said, "Oh yes, Peter, but that takes time," what I'll say to them, though, is if you were to add up the time that you spend with that child firefighting, then actually, if you were to spend a bit of time that was non-reactive time, but was actually in a calmer state of mind, where you could have a proper conversation, and, you know, so like the staff at our school, we were doing ongoing principles training, so that people knew about that, and they would watch the language that they use. So it wasn't, you know, you've made me upset and all that. It was, you know, different to that. Yeah. So you know, and I mean, we live in a world where there are going to be consequences to actions. there's a 25-year-old that there's a group of us that, and Sue started it off. You know Sue, don't you? Of course you do. Yeah. Supporting this young person. She'd had 70 convictions. She's been in prison 4 times. She's been tagged. And she's been doing some of the principles. And she's just beginning to wake up at 25 that there are consequences to actions. And that if, because before it's always been the system's wrong.
Yeah.
That's why, the system's done this to her. That's what she's not in prison because of anything she's done. It's not because she's thumped hell out of somebody and done GPH, but it's because the system's bad for treating her in this awful way, this disrespectful way. And yet she was one of the most disrespectful people in some of the things that she said and did. And she needed to know that there was a consequence, because if you don't get that, you're going to keep on rubbing up against the world, really. And certainly the world that, how our society's set up. So I think, we would be doing them a disservice if we didn't do that. But I think, again, it's a lot of what I really and truly believe is that if it can come from a loving space, so that, it's not that the teacher's trying to deal with something where the teacher's tried to manage the class, trying to deliver the lesson, has been wound up to the 9th degree because of somebody's behaviour. And then that teacher goes to try to talk to the child afterwards. They're going to feel pretty pissed off with the child in the moment, So that's possibly not the best person or the best timing to do that. And that's really tough because, secondary school, you're going from lesson to lesson. Primary school, you've got a bit more opportunity because you build a relationship with them, because they're there all day. And if they're mucking you about at 9:30, they're still with you at 3:30. So the possibility of you catching them and having a few moments and 5 minutes with them, you've got much more opportunity for it. So it is a tough one, but I think they need to know, but they need to be measured, really. Because sometimes parents think, they get the idea of, I've got to put in consequences. So they've done something, they've been called into school, and they say, right, you can't have your walk, you can't have this, you can't have that, no television, no friends, and they've taken everything away. Well, if you take everything away, you might as well go for broke, really, and do totally obnoxious things, won't you, really? And what are you going to learn from that? That the adults can bully you into removing all your stuff and all your pleasures. So it's best to keep something that you can negotiate on, really, isn't it? Because, and so, I have to admit, with our children growing up, there were times where there was some sort of incentive to them to do what we wanted them to do, and they've managed to grow up, and they are all right, I think. So.
Yeah, and that's another thing about this idea of incentives. If you do X, then you can have Y. And again, I'm a bit uncomfortable with that, but I can see how in the short term it can be okay.
I think you're right, Martin. You've hit the nail on the head there. I think it's short term, really. I think that sometimes to get children that have got locked into some habitual thinking, that sometimes you can do something that's different, and that if they do X, then they get Y, and it's a positive thing. I know it's a behaviourist approach, but sometimes that is just enough to lift them out of the doldrums that they've got into, and then they're more open to hearing something that's a bit more longer lasting, because any of those things are like sticking a sticky plaster over it, really, when perhaps they need a full operation.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm working with a kid at the moment, 1-to-1, and he tries to negotiate everything. Well, I'll do my maths if I can have 20 minutes on the computer, and you give him you give him 10 minutes, but he'll take 20, and you can't drag him off. And then of course, it's okay, but there is so much going on underneath to address in the longer term, isn't there? that
Yeah.
sometimes in the moment it's a bit of a challenge to know, I found, where to go. Yeah, and come back to this idea about consequences as well. You know, sometimes the kids have accused me of being a bit too soft because I'll talk about something rather than scream and shout and give them what they're used to and what they expect a teacher to do as well. So again, that's all part of the education process, isn't it? It's education about how it works. But also, them to know that there is a definite line. You can't just call somebody an effing C and smack him in the face and think you're going to get away with it.
No.
But there's going to be
if you do that out in the street, you're going to get hauled up and you're going to get taken off, you know, with the police, aren't you?
Yeah.
But I think you know, the trouble is at times is that, you know, this is where it needs to be an ethos and a culture of that's developed within the school, and that the staff that you're working with, you know, need to be influenced along a route that says you don't go shouting at children. You know, you don't bully them into submission, because all that you're proving to them and role modeling for them is you know, a negative thing, really. And then you know, I've seen people shout at children and then say to me, they're disrespecting me because they're shouting at me. You think, come on. And it is hard because people get emotional. There's a big emotional investment. Teachers put a lot in, and I get that. And the most successful teachers are the ones that, you know, care so much about children first, holistically, and then they worry about their English and their maths and their science and all that, you know. And children know that, and they pick up on that and respond to that really well. But, you know, it sounds a bit like, you know, you need a cultural change to support what you're doing, really, because one on your own is very tough against those sorts of numbers, Martin. No, it doesn't sound very hopeful, but
well, I mean,
but you see, you will also get through. I think you will, even though children might say, "Oh, you know, you're being soft." It can often open up that curiosity. And that there's a different way, you know.
Yeah, and they know when you're coming from that right place, don't they? They know when you're doing it with love.
Yeah.
I mean,
that would be my maxim for it all, really.
Yeah.
Whatever the message is, you know, come from a loving space. And I've had to say to one or two members of staff some really difficult things at times. And I've thought about it beforehand, and I've thought, I'm just going to have to see how it goes in the moment. But I just need to make sure that when we do it, I'm in the best place I can be in. And you can't always do that, but, you know, mainly I just know that for outcomes are always better when it's from a good space.
Yeah.
When you're from an irritated space, and whether that's sort of mildly irritated to bloody cross, you know, that never works well. It's never a good outcome.
No. I think teachers understanding state of mind, their own and kids, is absolutely the secret to it. So they're resilient, even though it's, you know, you're in the middle of a thunderstorm. I think when teachers start to get that, then they don't react as often, do they?
Yeah. No.
There's a lot of work to be done. But
I think you're doing great work there, Martin.
Really.
Deserve
a medal, Martin.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're really coming to an end, and it's been absolutely wonderful. And I kind of just wanted to do a sort of pick out a couple of highlights for me, you know, from what you, Peter, have been talking about, and that really kind of stand out. First one, you know, the fact that every human being, including every child and every adult, that we live in the feeling of our thinking, and there is flow to that, kind of, you know, going in and out of sort of, you know, seeing it and not seeing it, and kind of getting caught up and taking things seriously, or just letting things flow. And then another piece that really kind of I loved you talking about, and then even with Natalie's question, and with what Martin sort of was talking about, is there seems to be this intelligence that kind of is way more intelligent than any of us could be, in terms of getting us in and out of being caught up in our thinking or our frustration or whatever that is. And that, when people work with children, when we think, well, how do we kind of manage their kind of, let's say, behavior that comes out of their thinking and feeling in the moment, is it's the space, it's time to give in some sort of way to give them in order for their thinking to settle. And in terms of what would that look like, what I loved hearing is, well, that's going to look like all sorts of different ways in different moments. So therefore not being very prescriptive in terms of there's a strategy to deal with it, or what, and as an adult you think might be helpful. But there is also this time potentially when a child is in a calmer state, having a conversation and questioning what would be helpful, because there's not just an intelligence of the teacher there, but it is intelligent of a child that we quite often as adults forget. And I love what you sort of spoke, Peter, is about, when you're a teacher in a classroom, it's not just what you know, but it's also what all the other children, so there's 31 of you, what have got access to what, to solutions. I love it. I mean, it's been amazing talk and conversation. And
no, it's lovely hearing from people, and I think the thing that I like being part of this WOW project is that it's joining up people that are doing stuff with young people, because I mean, when we look at some of the problems that we have in the world, when we look to our young people, they are the source for sorting out all sorts of those, really. And actually, if they can understand, if they could get something, if they can get a glimmer of this understanding, the potential is huge. It is, use that word transformational easily, but actually I really mean that, because I've seen it in my own life. I've seen it with my daughter, Ishka. If you've seen Ishka talk on YouTube, if you haven't, it's worth having a look. She's my 10-year-old granddaughter having a chat with me about what it's been like growing up with the principles. And so it's ISHKA, Ishka.
Yeah, I think that's also that can be found on the webofwellbeing.org website through that as well. Yes,
right. Oh, and it's on my website as well, andersonwellbeing.com. Yeah, no, I've just had that put on there. But that's funny, because she just, in a very sweet way, talks about these principles. And I mean, the funny thing, just the very last thing, the funny thing that she said in there, I said to her, so these 3 principles, so she reels off what they are. So I said, so do you know what they mean? I don't really know what. Well, the first thing to say is that when you said about 3 principles, I thought you meant 3 head teachers, because at her school they call it the principal. Different sort of principal.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant.
Yeah, funny.
Well,
yeah, great. We'll have to do this again.
Fantastic. Absolutely. Well,
yeah.
Thank you, everyone. I mean, it's been lovely to be joined from people, from Canada, UK, and New Zealand. I can't believe it's so lovely to have you here, Judy. Please do have a look at our website. It's at webofwellbeing.org, and you can contact us through that or via email, which is oh my goodness, now Project Global, is it? Oh, if you go to the website, you'll be able to reach us, and I will put, when I publish this recording, I'll put information about our email. I can't think of it now. So if you want, we've got a mentors group that you can learn more about from others, and we're hoping to hold more webinars going forward. So thank you, everyone. See you all soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.